correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm Steve, and over on the other side of my screen is someone else named Steve.
Hello.
And we're going to try and get an episode recorded as long as technical difficulties don't get in the way of such.
Correct.
If not, you may hear one of us talk to ourselves for a while.
And then there will be a time skip.
But anyway, before we get into all that, what's our D20 Network podcast of the week this week, Steve?
Well, it's the new podcast, the new old podcast.
Yes.
The Wondrous Atlas of Creation's Destiny.
Yes.
Which is, we had one or both the hosts on a while back. My memory is terrible.
When we did our it was a follow-up to the super powered fantasy stuff we had talked about. And we talked with Aramithius and Rials, who are the hosts of said podcast, a couple of wonderful chaps from the UK. And yeah, they, and if you go back and listen to the episode they did with us, it's about I want to say a month and a half ago, they really know Exalted. Or at least it appears to me they really know Exalted. They were certainly spouting lots of things about it that I had no clue about.
No disrespect to them, but they could have absolutely been making stuff up and we'd have been like, yeah, oh, that's awesome.
But I have seen them about some other places, and they do actually seem to know their stuff. Very, very cool people.
Yeah, very nice. And
it's very much a lore and setting exploration of the game. And actually what they usually do is they take any topic and they split it into two episodes, one discussing the lore and then a second discussing how to actually use this in your games, which I think is a neat way to approach it.
It really is.
And there's a spaceship that is a god.
Yeah, some cool stuff happening there. Exalted is really interesting.
On the subject of Exalted, I wonder, have you ever watched Black Clover?
The anime?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I don't think that is an Exalted setting, but I think Exalted would work really well for that, to play that. If what I'm understanding of Exalted is correct.
Possibly, but I wouldn't, mainly because I feel like Exalted's a higher power level than Black Clover. Because now, granted, not a huge fan of Black Clover, so I dropped it after season 1. But what I remember of season 1,
50 episodes.
I know, but what I remember of season 1 was that it was like not as high power level. I don't know. It's been a long time. I could be wrong.
I'm partway through season 1, so
okay.
I could be wrong too.
I don't think it's as high power level as Exalted wants to be. I think a better example would be Good Omens on Amazon, where it's literally an angel and a demon existing and doing shenanigans.
Aha.
Which is a fantastic series that got a second season, and I haven't seen it yet, so don't spoil it, guys. That might change by the time this episode comes out. I don't know. We'll see how tonight goes. Anyways, speaking of seeing how tonight goes, we're talking about one-shots and the tones we set with them.
Yeah.
As compared to like long-term play.
Yeah. Which I think, we've done an episode or two about tone, and I think it's really important. But one-shots are different than campaigns. Gee.
Did you happen to write down who suggested this topic?
I believe that was Eric.
Oh, hi, Eric.
I'd have to go back and scroll through the channel, but I think it was Eric.
Oh, okay. That's fine. That's a good topic.
It is. And I think the biggest thing is that I think perhaps your tone needs to be more clearly defined for a one-shot, but it also can let you experiment a little bit more in a lot of ways.
So, yeah, let me speak to my brain process for a minute. When I run one-shots, I turn the crazy dial up as far as I can turn it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one shots are, and I felt this way for a long time, and I'm sure somebody's going to disagree with me on this, but I feel like one shots work really well for no subtlety, but the pure feel or vibes of a game. Whereas like long-term play, whatever that may look like, is where you get into a lot of the subtlety and the details of what a story can do. You don't have
Fair.
time in a one shot. Like in most cases, you're only doing one, maybe two, at most 3 sessions, and you don't have the time to get into like character subtlety or nuances in the system or nuances in a story in a lot of ways. You
Mm-hmm.
have to get to the point and finish it up, even though you can have like interesting details and interesting nuances. But I don't think you're going to have as nearly as in depth of a story as you're going to with a long term or longer term thing.
Mm. No, I think that's certainly a way to look at it. I think, everything you said is completely accurate. I think in most cases with a campaign, to contrast it, with a campaign, you do just because of people's attention spans, because it's okay, the thing I'm going to draw a comparison here is, let's say a TV special, hour and a half, even call it a TV movie or a TV series. You're going to have moments in a movie that are a little more one way tonally than other. You might have a serious tone overall, but a couple of light breaks. In a TV series, you almost always have a lot of tonal ups and downs and changes, but they're usually more specific by episode. And
Yeah,
to me, that's the difference in a one shot and a campaign.
you can get into those episodic things. I think you're onto something there. I think a campaign should be more episodic, even though, you have campaigns where you're trying to tie every episode together. Like my D&D campaign, it wouldn't make any sense to just have a random filler episode. But
Mm-hmm.
it does make sense that this week is a follow-up to last week, which is a follow-up to the week before that. Whereas in some games you can do, this is different than last week and this is different than last week. We see that with Monster of the Week. We see that with Dungeon Crawl Classics or Morkborg or any of those that really aren't meant for super long form campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree that where you were driving at, that you can tell maybe more of a movie story with a one shot, because you have basically movie length rather than having television length, which is double, triple, but quadruple, whatever. In the case of The Simpsons, you have like 20 times the movie length, or 200 times, or whatever the math is on that. But
A lot.
yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, you have a shorter time period, so you can tell a more succinct story. I do kind of agree with that. You have a beginning, middle, and end that the people in that game walk away from.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of times in 10 plus sessions of gaming, you lose, you basically only react to the part of the story where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than having the whole picture of like, oh, well, we started here and now we're here, and then the end goal looks like this, you're at like, I'm somewhere near the middle because we were like here and then we got to here and now we're moving on to this. Like, so it definitely gives different perspective. And I know that the note takers are like, oh, but I have all of the details. That's great. I'm not a note taker. I think it shocks no one that I do not take notes when I game. I am purely there for the day.
Well, see, I have done things with characters where, say, my character wasn't the brightest. So I intentionally will take very vague notes or slightly incorrect notes.
Yeah, I rely on the other note takers in the group because there's usually one that's better than me. So I just rely on them to be like, all right, what happened last week? Same when I GM. It's identical to when I GM, because I go, what happened last week? Because I don't remember. I can tell you what I think happened. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think, but also it's also concentration. So that's sort of what I was driving at when I said about turning the crazy dial up to 11. With a one shot, 3 sessions and you're done. It's like a concentrated. It's not, we haven't had the time to add the water to the juice. This is just pure orange concentrate. Right? It's tart, it's sour, it's hard to swallow, but you're going to deal with it. And it's going to be straightforward and to the point. And I think if you have one shot that's kind of meandering, you missed the point of one shot. I'm sorry.
I think that's
unless your whole goal is to, I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but unless your whole goal is to show somebody a system and that's it, if you have one shot that's too meandering, you missed the mark.
I think that's a valid thing. I think the thing with one shots that you can do much easier than campaign, this is kind of based off of what you're just saying, is that you can be more concentrated. You can be maybe even a little experimental, like, okay, I don't want to run a campaign based around, this one thing, but I can write a heck of a one shot off of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm like, this is not a full campaign, but this is absolutely a one shot. And then there's a lot of things that I go, this is not a one shot, this is a full campaign. Call of Cthulhu is that way for me. I feel like I can tell, I feel like I could have a good time with a Call of Cthulhu one shot, but I would have a really good time with a Call of Cthulhu long play.
See, I feel like Call of Cthulhu, I think in
Take
many
a shot,
ways,
by the way. If you're still playing the drinking game in 2023, take a shot because we mentioned it.
It's a great one-shot game because you can have a little contained mystery and things, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think on some level, and look, there's a couple of absolutely legendary pre-written campaigns for Call of Cthulhu. Primarily, I'm thinking of Massive Nyarlathotep, or however anyone wants to pronounce it, and I think it's called Beyond the Mountains of Madness or something like that are both regarded, specifically Masks, as amongst the best, pre-written campaigns out there.
Yeah, and that one's particularly long too.
Yeah, they are.
Like, not, it's not like this is a pre-written campaign that you'll finish in a week. No, this is a pre-written campaign that you'll finish in a year.
Yeah, I want to say I think the book for it is actually significantly thicker than the core rule book.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing is, in a game specifically Call of Cthulhu, because characters are a bit more fragile. And again, I don't know Masks, but I think those function best where the story is viewed a bit from a third person perspective.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Where, like how last week when we were talking with Jacob and he was talking about Alien, how the story is for Steve, not Steve's character.
Right.
Where I think with a one shot, you can do it kind of either way. I think.
Oh yeah. No,
one shots. I think to put it super simply, I think one shots need to be more focused, but can be. How do I want to? I think concentrated is the exact right way to say it, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, there's a term, short, sweet, and to the point. That's all there is to it. One shots, that should be your golden rule with a one shot. Mm-hmm. Short, sweet, and to the point. Now, not saying I haven't played in some one shots that ended in an absolute question mark.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna do that, make sure that the ending that you're ending in a question mark is satisfying enough for the players that they're not going to feel like they got ripped off by playing in that one shot.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is nothing worse than playing in a one shot and feeling like you wasted 4 hours.
Well, I will think, and I'm not trying to toot my horn here by any stretch, but I ran a one shot for some of our listeners quite a while back, the Delta Green thing, and we ended on a fade to black. And every person that was there was like, oh, that was just perfect.
Right.
Because we all kind of knew what happened, but we didn't say it.
Exactly. No, and sometimes you don't need to. But like I said, you got to be, especially for inexperienced GMs, you got to be careful with ending one shots like that, because you can run into a situation where your one shot is going to be lackluster or disappointing because the ending wasn't as strong.
Okay. Now I've caught up with where my brain was.
What was that?
I've caught up with what I was thinking before, and my brain had stopped halfway through me talking.
Okay.
So, like you said, your tone, whatever, concentrate. I think in most cases, you actually need to do that more so in a one shot
Yes.
because you don't have the time to do those subtleties that people think are great. You need to smack them in the face and make them remember it, for lack of
Yep.
a
Yep.
better.
Nope. Every
So,
day of the week. Every day.
where I think if you do that in a campaign every single week, that you smack them in the
Yeah,
face with
it
tone,
loses its luster.
right? It becomes a exercise in bludgeoning, not, oh, that was cool.
That's when I was subtlety. It's very important that you're throwing some of that subtlety to the side and going, I need pure, like, just need to get rid of some of the subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not saying if your one shot is split amongst 3 sessions, that doesn't mean you can't have any subtlety amongst those 3 sessions. You just need to proceed with caution.
Well, yeah, yeah. You can. Well, you can still have distinct segments of it, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be all the exact same tone. But I think, like you mentioned, and look, we all love those zany things, but the beauty of one shots is the ability, like you said, to turn the crazy knob, twist it off,
Yeah.
or the dark knob, or
Yeah.
whatever,
Pick a
because
dial and turn it up.
everyone is coming into this with the expectation that this is a short, contained thing. So I think the intensity can be higher without it feeling exhausting.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's a balancing act like everything else, but I think with one shots, and often why I've talked to people and they're like, I want to run a game, and I'm like, okay, start your first game as a one shot. And the reason I tell people that is because you have the forgiveness that whatever happens, leave it at the table. You're not going to go back to this thing. It gives you the confidence and the strength you need to become a better GM. I ran a bunch of one shots before I felt comfortable running a long form campaign.
Mm.
And I feel like it's a good starting point. Makes you almost a better GM because you're not inexperienced, and then simultaneously you know how far you can push things and how subtle things can be.
Yeah.
It's a really, really cool way to get started into gaming. Plus, the other cool thing with one shots, and I'm just going to say this now because if I have anybody that's listening is on the fence about gaming or about running stuff, with one shots, you are not beholden as much to people's schedule. I need
True.
you for 4 hours on a Saturday or whatever day of the week you choose to run that one shot. I don't need you every Saturday for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I think, though, in terms of your tone, you owe it to your players, especially with a one shot, to be clear about the tone. Maybe give them a little more of a, I don't even want to say a primer, but just a clear definition of what you expect from them, especially convention, or if it's people you don't normally play with. But because your tone and your whatever can be so much more concentrated, like you're saying, I think you definitely want to convey that going in.
right. And I think, in my opinion, this is what I've sort of started doing it. When you're writing up the description of your one shot, the first 2 sentences of that description should describe just the basics of what you need to know. How many players, rough age of those players, maturity level at the table, what safety tools you're using, and then the next sentence should be like tone.
Mm-hmm.
We're going, I'm looking for 5 players, 18 plus, mature game. Let's say we're going for, I'm going to use red, yellow, green safety tools. And then my next is like, we're doing a gory, graphic, rough game. And that's, basic one sentence tone helps you also get your tone put on paper so you know what to follow.
Yes. Yes.
because you can lose the forest through the trees if you don't take the time to actually put yourself out on paper.
Oh, and you and I know that all too well.
And oftentimes, and you know this, I know this, session prep for me in most cases looks like me writing about 1 or 2 sentences of initial tone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm going to look at. If I'm looking at notes when I'm gaming, I'm looking at what I set the initial tone at. And that can change. That can change. That tone does not need to be super, super strict unless you dictate it be super, super strict.
True. I was going to say, yeah, you can have, and especially like you were saying, where one of the things you like to do with one shots is turn the crazy up. Well, sometimes that leads to very unplanned and dramatic change in direction, which can also tonally shift things depending on how they decide to approach it.
Correct.
Doesn't, not right, wrong.
So to talk on that a little bit, just while you're gathering your thought.
Mm-hmm.
At Gamer Nation Con, I ran a game called It Wasn't Us Meddling Kids. We all know this. It was a rip-roaring success. People told stories about it. It was hilarious. I did not know the tone of that game when I went into it. Now, that's not saying I didn't know the tone of any of it. I knew that it was going to be goofy. I knew that it was going to be silly. What I didn't know was the tonal direction of goofy and silly we were going to go. Because Scooby-Doo can do a lot of goofy, silly tonal things, but also be kind of subtle in some ways. Like, there are more modern portrayals of Scooby-Doo, like I think it was called Mystery Inc. from the mid-2000s. It was a really good version of Scooby-Doo, but it was a lot more mystery and a lot less Abbott and Costello meets Scooby-Doo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the old, Frankenstein meets Scooby-Doo was a thing, and that's goofy and silly. Or I saw clips on TikTok of Kiss meets Scooby-Doo. It's like recent. It's bizarre because it plays into Kiss lore. In case you didn't know, Kiss has a whole lore to their like face makeup and the world they come from, because they're all like star children. It's wild. Okay.
I'm not that big of a fan, to be honest.
I'm not a big fan of Kiss either, but after seeing a clip of Gene Simmons and then Lance Staley and like the whole crew making a interdimensional portal out of what was a Ferris wheel in this Scooby-Doo thing, I had to go look up Kiss lore.
Okay.
And I will start sending you pieces of it because it is bizarre. Anyways,
on the subject of weird music related stuff, did you happen to see the pictures that one of our Discord users posted of the Iron Maiden miniatures?
Yes. What are those for? Are they just minis?
They are, but he said they're made by the same company, I think, that makes, like, I forget, he gave the company, and I'd have to look it up, but they make other like board games and stuff, and they're intended for use with those games.
Oh, so they're just a universal miniature.
Kind of, yeah. But they were bad.
Zombicide, Running Sun. Yes. Yeah, Rising Sun, Onk. Sorry. That's awesome. I want those. I got to get on those. Like I needed more things to. Anyways. No, that's awesome. But where was I? Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo has a lot of tonal directions to take. And you can go super goofy, you can go super serious, or not super serious, but semi-serious with it, and get a very different experience. You as the GM know tonally that it's going to be a comedy. That's basically what you know going into that game. Walking away from it, the players dictate the story. And that's true with a lot of one-pagers. But it is such a fun way to run a tabletop RPG and such a fun way to run a one-shot. Set your tone and then be flexible with your players. Because if they go, why did you wanted your tone to be deadly serious? But this is kind of a goofy situation. Can we laugh about it? And if you're cool with that, be cool with that. Now, if you're running something super serious and players want to come in and be goofy, that might be a different problem. But
yeah, hey, I mean, I think you're also talking about the difference between a convention one shot and a one shot for your normal crew.
Yeah, but also one shots are weird for me. Normal crew isn't always the same people, especially for us. Like, we have a handful of people that rotate through. We know who's roughly going to be there, but that doesn't necessarily mean, you know.
Right.
So I'm just going based off of what I have experienced. But you're right. For most people, you're talking about the game store crew. So you have maybe 15, 20 people that you know is going to be possible players. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. You have you have an idea. It's going to be 4 to 6 of these 15.
Right.
Yeah. And whereas with, at a convention, it can be
4 to
complete
6 of
strangers you've
these
never met,
thousand.
never will again.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it can't be fun, right? And I think that's where
that's where the fun of dialing it up comes in, because when you don't know who it's going to be, you just sit down and you turn up the dial, and they don't know, they don't know you, you don't know them, and you need to set, like, in my opinion, I want to put an impression with them and them walk away going, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, I think exactly. And I think that's where you see some games, like I ran it at Gamer Nation Con. I'm going to run it again at PGX here in a few months. Havoc Brigade was expressly written as a one-shot con game.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Havoc Brigade is effectively all those crazy ideas that you come up with but are a little too crazy to actually try in your regular game. That's what you're supposed to do in Havoc Brigade. So like you said, it just turns those knobs all the way a certain direction. And I think that's the beauty of one shots, is that you can be, like I said early on here, kind of almost experimental with it and going, what if we turn this knob all the way? What does it do?
Right, exactly.
Where in a campaign, that can have ramifications that either mess up your storyline, mess up your players, concept of what they want to do, whatever. Whereas I think, because I think, and this is obviously very much an individual player thing, but I think one shots are less precious to players than campaigns. And I say precious and not important, because I feel like in a one shot, you probably didn't put as much effort into the character. You're not thinking of the character as living in the world long term as much as where in a campaign, your character, you're thinking, how do they interact with all this stuff and what happened to them before, where, in a one shot, it's right here, right now.
Right, exactly.
I don't know, maybe I'm off base, but I think that's at least an angle that can be taken. I think the other thing that's kind of fun with one shots, though, is to run the same adventure multiple times and see how different players take it.
Oh yeah.
Just to see where it goes with different inputs. Or you could intentionally try and run the same adventure with a different tone. And look, I know I mentioned this when we talked about tone a long time ago, but I remember when I was a child watching an episode of Sesame Street, and they had this little clip where they were talking about how, music can make you feel a certain way about how you're seeing something. And they had this clip of an alligator walking across something, and they did it once with like some super serious, dark, imposing whatever, and another time with like calliope music, and they both fit perfectly as far as with the way the alligator was moving and everything, but it made you feel so different.
Exactly. No, and that's tone. Like that's tone in a nutshell.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, like you said, I think tone is more of a living thing in a campaign, where depending on how your players react to circumstances, it's going to move and ebb. And while you may have an overall tone kind of established, it's going to move around with the story, where with the one shot, again, concentrated, focused. Because with a one shot, you have to be more concentrated and focused in your storytelling, etc. With a campaign, if they don't get to the thing this week, then okay. But in a one shot, that is the thing. Your distractions, your side quests, they don't, there isn't room for them, so to speak, or as much, definitely. And so I think the same applies to tone. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. No. Your video appeared to be freezing, so I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Nope, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else do we have on this? I mean, like, I feel like if I were to give my sentiments, I think I don't want to say tone is more or less important, but I think, to borrow your word, concentrated is kind of the key thing with tone in a one shot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest.
Not that you couldn't have just a silly, dungeon clearing one shot or,
I mean, that's
pretty basic whatever, but I feel like a
there's
one shot is,
games for that.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
At the end of the day, Morkborg's a game for that.
yeah, but
Like,
Morkborn has a built-in tone to it.
yeah, it does. You could do that with like AD&D,
Yeah.
and it you don't have a built-in tone there. But there's a lot of games that it's just, oh, what was it? Dungeon Crawl Classics, I think, is one of them that's like just whatever whatever tone you want to go for, just as long as you're using these like combat rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a lot of the OSR element is.
I feel that. I feel like a lot of the OSR is like, hey, remember when there weren't so many rules about how we had to play this game, and more so just rules about how to play the game?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought because some of these OSR stuff, which the Morkborg stuff is generally loosely defined as OSR, and that has a very kind of defined overall tone to it. But
But
yeah, I think
there's no penalties in that system if you don't follow that tone.
fair.
In actual Dungeons and Dragons in current 5th edition, if you don't take everything that it's feeding you as serious, there are penalties for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know how else to put it, but that's the way I read it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I don't know. Now you reminded me of something else I saw this week, which
What's
was I think it was on Dicebreaker or one of the bigger gaming sites. They ranked Dungeons and Dragons editions in terms of crunch to go back a couple episodes.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly how it all went, but I know least crunchy was like the original basic D&D, followed by 5th edition, with 3rd edition ranked as the most complex, which I think shocks nobody.
I don't think that shocks anybody at all.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like I said, I think one shots are fun though, I think from a tonal perspective because you can be more adventurous in a lot of ways and try stuff and go, oh, okay, it doesn't work, so maybe I won't try and do that in a campaign. Or you go, oh, that worked really well. I'm going to put a chapter like this in my campaign, where you might not be able to do that with everything else.
Right.
What else we got?
I don't know. I don't know if I can't think right now of other things. I had a topic that I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't think of what. I don't know. You got anything else to talk about?
I don't think with the tone stuff. Not really. Let me look at that thread here real quick. Okay, and maybe we can do a lot more on this. But what about random encounters? Do you like them one shots versus campaigns, one over the other?
I like them in campaigns. I don't care for them in one shots.
Mm-hmm.
I like them in campaigns because a random encounter can sort of cover you when you're running low on ideas that way, right? Like, say you're just running into the fatigue wall that we all kind of hit. A random encounter can sort of be a nice automation to the game to help make it so that you're not going, oh man, I got to come up with another combat. You just do random encounter. Whereas in one shots, I feel they dilute it too much, depending on the frequency at which you're doing them. But I feel like you should know what. And I'm not saying this is a dig because I've been there, I've done that. But I feel like you should know when your encounter should happen in a one shot, and it shouldn't be a just need to fill this spot here.
Yeah.
And in that case, it's not a random encounter any longer. A planned encounter. And you should
like you
should have an idea of what they're fighting. they get to it. Now, with a randomer in a long form campaign, you don't necessarily have to know what they're going to fight going into it. It could be anything. I'm just going back. That's what I have. Like that's right now. Be in from place A to place B, it's robbed. Now they're being robbers. It could be the gang's in town A, bad guy from town B shows up in town A. Now there's a whole fight, right? Like that's you have a like you don't have to have the most concrete idea of who they're going to fight to campaign play because you sometimes need them from that just constant on you. Whereas,
so do you try?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you use random encounters, do you worry a lot about tying them into the story in general, or are they just sort of bumps in the road?
It really, they are sort of bumps in the road for me. Whereas planned encounters are planned encounters and they're story beats. A random encounter, like I think of like, I don't know, Batman beats up a man in a day on his bike, right?
You're
runs
into.
In and out. Can you hear me?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay. I don't know why that. But Batman fights a bunch of henchmen in a day on his way to fight whoever, right? Like if he's going to fight the Riddler, he's going to fight a bunch of Riddler goons and solve a handful of puzzles. So that's sort of what I throw at my gang is I'll just go, here's a whole little mini fight to get you prepped. And if you end up walking away hurt, okay, well, that sucks. But in 5th edition, it's not so much of a worry. But here's a fight. It's just a way. And sometimes if I have really narratively heavy session, I'll throw in a encounter just to give them something, to give my players that aren't necessarily there for the narrative something for grab on.
I think you bring up a point about with one-shots is a lot of time you don't really have time for those.
Right.
I know I've done stuff in one-shots where I may have what might seem like a random encounter kind of sitting there off to the side as either I'm going to pull it or put it in depending on time as far as how fast the session is moving.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes if you're not paced out right, you do need to add in an extra combat. I still don't call those random encounters. I plan for them. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah, no, I think they feel more like a random encounter as a player, though.
They feel like it, but I'm not trying to hurt in a way. But on my side, at least, I usually have them ready to go, at least in the camp. Whereas, like, if I'm running a random encounter in D&D, it's straight from the, ooh, I saw a thing in the book. Or I'll find a random encounter table and, okay, well, you got one of these.
Yeah, I like the tables, but I find a lot of times tables are more inspiration than I actually use it as a true random table.
If I didn't, I have one at easy access a lot of times, so I usually just bring it up on it. If I wasn't at that page frequently, I use a table. It would be whatever I found in the book that looks fun for them to fight. But I had found, I don't know the page or anything. I'd found a table in one of the books I have that I'm running the game out of, and was like, "This is perfect. This is a good random encounter table of stuff that they're not going to just run into on a normal basis." So,
yeah,
that's my thoughts on random encounters. I think they're good in form. I think they're terrible in form, and I mean, I would love to have somebody run me through a random encounter in a short form game and change my mind, but every time I've tried to do them or any time I've seen them done, I'm always like, this kind of sucks.
Seems reasonable, and I can't really disagree. All right. I think that's enough of that, and your internet seems to be starting to fritz on us, so let's
move on to Game of the Week.
Woohoo! Game of the Week!
Game of the Week! Game of the Week!
All right. Who's going first?
I'll go first.
All right.
I don't actually have a full-on game. I have an adventure for Morkborg.
Okay.
And it's called Frostbite. It's a cold and ruthless adventure. I think here in the hottest days of the summer, we need a little bit of cooling off. Would you like me to send you a link?
You can. Yeah, since you've probably already got it up, that'll go quicker than me.
Yep.
Clatterty bang typing.
It's in the green room.
All right. Oh, there we go. No. What are you doing, thing?
So this is an adventure for Morkborg. And it is Delia's paint is going thin. Why is everyone so pale, so cold? It is a cold, cruel, gnarly adventure for Morkborg, and I am absolutely down for a cold and cruel, gnarly adventure for Morkborg.
Cool.
I don't want to run this in December. I would run this tomorrow. But up here in the Northeast, it's not fun to think about the cold cruelties of winter in the wintertime. It is fun, however. Think about the cold cruelties of winter when it's 85 degrees and 80% humidity.
This is, yes.
But that's my game of the week.
All right. So to do a bit of a tonal shift, and this was actually unintentional, but it actually is a game using the same dice system as last week's game of the week for me.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. This is from Gallant Knight Games, who put out a few other things that we've been curious about. And this just looks like it could be really fun for a one-shot, or if you've got children that want to play a game. My game of the week this week is a game called Knights of the Underbed.
I saw this. It looks really cute.
Do you want a link, or do you?
No, I actually have it saved.
And so this, it says explore the dark and dangerous basement, creep into the creepy attic, or visit the glorious metropolis of Underbed, or whatever. And this is, you play the game using stuffed animals, dolls, action figures, that are all, and you're defending your sleeping human children from monsters and nightmares. So, I mean, tiny D6, which I believe is derived from the old West End D6 rules. So
I think it's
fairly simple and intuitive.
Yes, and it's also simplified even more if I'm remembering.
Yes. So, I mean, PDF will set you back all of $15. There are print-on-demand options, soft cover, hardcover, but yeah,
whatever your heart desires.
Yeah, and I feel like this one, talking about the different directions you could take tonally with the game. Think about the number of different twists you could put on this depending on who you were playing it with.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting game. I think that could be a lot of fun. I looked at it myself and was like, this seems really fun and really cute for like a table of, say, elementary schoolers, right?
Mm-hmm. Which I think is what it's intended for.
This could also be a really fun, really cool game for a table of elementary school parents. And just get a group of parents that got a bunch of kids in elementary school together and be like, we're going to play this game. We all got babysitters. It's that whole thing. I thought it looked really fun. I think you could have a really good time with it.
Yeah, I just think that the name is fun.
I think that name is really fun, but like I said, I thought the game looked really good. Well, with all that being said, as a reminder, links to everything are in the show notes. Facebook, Discord, Twitter, I guess X now.
Well, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Probably not that for too much longer. Looking into alternatives. We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. We do have a Mastodon on the Dice Camp server, but I almost never remember that it's there to post anything.
We have I didn't know that there's Mastodon, so nothing gets posted to Mastodon. But we'll fix that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Mastodon's going to be the solution.
Well, it's a little more compartmentalized. Also be stuff for the PGX convention if you're interested.
Yes. So we have
including the discount code.
Correct. Do we know what the discount code includes?
About 10%.
Nice. So
which is already cheap.
Yeah, it's an additional 10% off of the pre-order bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
links to all that in the show notes.
That's a gorgeous deal, man.
Yeah. I mean, $35 for a 2-day pass.
It's less than that if you use our promo code.
Mm-hmm.
Links to all that in the show notes. Link to X down there. And as always, we want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs, and as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.